Hi, everybody. My name's Jay Agner. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. We talk to founders about, you guessed it, how they got their first customer. This episode and every episode is sponsored by my company, JDAQA Software Testing. We're your one-stop shop for manual, automated, performance, and security testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name's Jay Agner. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Chris Sprague. How you doing, Chris?
Great, Jay. How are you?
I'm good. I did not list off all the things that you do because that would probably take about 15 minutes. So I was just going to, I see you're CEO of a bunch of things. You founded a bunch of things. You're a startup advisor. You've got, a lot of cool stuff going on. So I think this should be a great episode. Let's take it back to where you started. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I actually grew up in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. So I have an interesting background because I was born in Philadelphia and was adopted at birth. You know, I popped out and my mom looked at me and said, "That is the ugliest freaking baby I have ever seen. Get him out of my sight."
She sent you to the Lehigh Valley Zoo.
Yeah, exactly. I never thought I'm going to have to use that from now on. But no, I mean, it was something that, it's funny because I met both my birth parents. To give you a little bit of background on me, I met both my birth parents. They're great people. They both passed on. We had great relationships between the time I met them and the time they passed on. My mom told me the story. It just wasn't the right time. There wasn't the right place. So she made that horrible decision, that heart-wrenching decision that she was going to give me up for adoption. I got placed with a wonderful couple in the Lehigh Valley, and I had the interesting chance to have my family and all my roots are in Philadelphia. I mean, my birth father talks about literally being back here, like when the Von Trapps came over and that sort of thing. being that steeped in Philadelphia. And the fact is, but I grew up in this area with completely a different mindset. I mean, there's no different mindset than when you're talking Philly. I mean, Center City and South Philly and that sort of thing, and the Lehigh Valley. So I had this real interesting scenario growing up where I could really compare nature versus nurture and see what was from my birth family and what was from my adopted family, because you almost can't you can find people who are different, but definitely there was differences between the two. And the reason I bring that whole story up is, as we're going to talk about through my entrepreneurial journey, that led to a lot of decisions I've made as an entrepreneur, led to a lot of things I have done, and it's kind of proof. And this is the first thing I want to leave your audience with. If you have parents or if your family is non-entrepreneurial at all, that is not going to preclude you from getting that first customer, from starting something, from being an entrepreneur. Because I can tell you, my adopted family, zero entrepreneurial skills in the basic family. There's a couple people that were decent with business, but that wasn't the main focus.
Right.
You look at my birth family, definitely entrepreneurial, definitely the creative piece. And even if you're born into a non-entrepreneurial family, there's people in your lineage that might be. So please, for anybody listening to this who's thinking, I don't have a family, my dad's not Gary Vee or Elon Musk or anybody like that. It's like, that's cool. You can still do it. So
Right. Very cool. And how old were you when you met your birth parents?
So I was. This was interesting because I was 21 when I met my birth mother, and I was 32 when I met my birth father. So the interesting piece of all that is I met her first because when she put me up for adoption, she put all of her father's information on my adoption form, and he still lived at the same house with the same phone number. So it took the courts one phone call and to track her down.
Right.
And she knew enough information about my birth father that I could find him, but I held off on finding him for a number of reasons. Partly wanted to be successful, didn't want him to think I was trying to get something out of him, because it's one of those weird things where he had a very popular last name and there could have been some associations with some public figures. There wasn't, but it was something where I said, you know what, in case there is, let me just get to a point where he just wants to know me for me. So, but yeah,
Interesting.
they were both interesting and great, great meetings. I was one of the very fortunate adopted folks. I know how fortunate I am that when their parents find out that they want to meet, that they're eager and willing and want to have a relationship.
Right.
And I can tell you that for anybody who's listening, it's funny that we're talking about this because this, a lot of times when I talk from stage, this becomes literally the most powerful thing. I mean, I can talk about business, I can help people build businesses, I can advise startups, I can do everything. And what people have told me is this particular story ends up becoming the most powerful for them because of how challenging adoption can be. As
Right.
part of what people said, part of also people, people go, well, I'm adopted, I can't be an entrepreneur. It's like, why? Well, as people have left me, they'll always leave me. Yeah, but doesn't have to define you.
Right.
So it's something I know how fortunate I am to have that experience though. And if you haven't had that experience, it's okay. I can tell you that it's interesting because I also have three. Yes, three. I just had to make sure. I have three brothers. I have zero brothers in my adoptive family, but I have three brothers with my birth family, and two of them we're really close, and one is definitely a challenge. So I've had that experience as well, where you've got two parts of the family saying, "Hey, you're our brother. We love you. Everything's cool," and one takes a little bit of time.
Right.
And it's just like business. And this is where it all goes back to entrepreneurship. I'm a big believer that experiences in our life, even if they don't directly relate to entrepreneurship, can be used in entrepreneurship.
Yep.
So you would think that people who are blood relatives would just be like, you know what, we're blood, this is cool. A lot of times in business, we think just because we align with somebody, or just because we've seen a post and we like it, or just because we have the same feeling as somebody, that they're going to be, hey, cool, let's go. And part of the time it will be. Part of the time you're going
Right.
to find people who say, hey, we completely align. Let's just, I mean, Jay, you probably have gone through it too, where you call somebody up and go, I've talked to this person for 5 minutes, we got a partner. We've zero clue how, but we've just got a partner because
Right.
this
Yeah.
person aligns. And then there's other people who you looked at, you did research, and you said, we should be perfect matches. And you get on and go, it's just, I'm not feeling it yet. It's like there's something there. We
Yep.
want to keep going,
Yep.
but I'm not feeling it yet. And that's the second thing I want to leave. And I have to stop counting because I'll forget. But I know it's the second at this point. But that's the second thing I want to leave the entrepreneurs with is the fact that as you're starting a business, building a business, the thing you have to do is persevere and persist. But understand that there's going to be people who you think that you're perfect to partner with that will match on that. There's other people who you think you're perfect to partner with that will never match and they just won't see it. And
Right.
there's others that are going to take time.
Yep. Yep. That's very and it's I don't know if do you know the Awesome Sauce guys? Carl Starkey from Awesome Sauce. I did a podcast with him like I guess a couple months ago. He also was adopted and kind of had a similar journey, and just kind of stuck out to me. The stuff you're saying kind of rung true. So, tell me about kind of high school, college. Like, where'd you go with that vein, and then, where'd you leave? When did you leave Lehigh Valley, or did you leave Lehigh Valley?
Yeah, so once again, that becomes an interesting journey because I was heavily into acting. I will tell you, it's funny. I'm probably the only person, and while at one point in my life I was homeless, and it's knocked pretty much all the ego off me. This is going to be an egotistical statement. I guarantee you, I'm probably one of the only people you're ever going to interview that had lettered in drama. And I don't know if that's a badge of honor, if that's a badge of shame at this point. But the fact is that growing up, I was more creative. Right. Whether it was, I remember I ran the television studio for our high school and we did this project where we had to interview people. And I really didn't feel like interviewing a live person. So what I did was I ended up doing an interview that was literally me asking questions and taking a recording of a song from a band I liked and playing their song as the responses to the question. And I'll never forget because I got a 97 on the assignment, and literally the teacher's like, just don't ever just please just do the assignment right next time. I love the creativity, but just do what I ask you to do.
Right. Right.
But that's another thing, and the reason I bring up this story is another thing I want to leave entrepreneurs with. look, I always believe that we should be asking for permission versus asking for forgiveness. The fact is that, doing something against what somebody wants you to do, usually you're going to find when it goes wrong really bad. So it's always good to talk to people. It doesn't mean
Right.
you can't be creative and can't think outside the box and can't think of something that is really against, that is really different, that is really against, that really has, that might get people thinking. Because there are going to be those times when it's not going to hurt somebody, it's not going to affect somebody negatively, you're not going to impact negatively somebody's life, that you can kind of play in that gray area a little bit and, push the boundaries. Like I
Right.
said, I'd be very careful when I talk about that, because the fact is that you don't want to do anything illegal. You don't want to do anything immoral. You don't want to do anything unethical. You do want to look and be creative and kind of push the boundaries. And if you really believe you have an idea that is going to help humanity, is going to help you're going to help bring light to people, and other people aren't seeing it, then you might have to do things a different way to show them that it's possible. One
Right.
of the things I do right now is I mentor startups, and a lot of times we're stumping for funding, and I go out. And a lot of what I hear is prove to us. It's like, you have these great decks, you have all this other stuff, but prove to us you can actually be the success. And sometimes you need to just have that proof, even if it's a challenge. Like I said, I'm not advocating anything unethical, immoral, anything like that. But I should say, however, there are those times when it doesn't fall into those categories
Right.
that you can push the boundaries.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about high school is, by the end of high school, I was a DJ. I was doing weddings. I was working with a lot of local radio stations. I was having a blast, and it was good because I was a fairly good bowler at the time. I know. What a cool way to grow up,
Yeah.
right?
A drama
I'm a
guy and a
singer.
bowler.
I'm a singer. I'm in Pennsylvania Boys Choir. I'm doing drama and I'm bowling. Man, I was the coolest kid I was the coolest kid in
Right.
school. I don't do sarcasm, but I think that was it. But what that taught me, and here's another learning point I want to get across to your audience. The fact is that while I wasn't the coolest kid in school, I developed the knack for bringing people together and being able to be that mediator and being able to have influence in all groups. Like, as an example, I had this jock one day who was picking on a nerd. And I call him a nerd because he was a good friend of mine at the time. And the fact is that he would even admit he's a nerd. He ended up being a big computer geek, and it was awesome. But the fact is that I looked at the kid and I said, "Yo, dude," I said, "just give him a chance. Stop making fun of him and give him a chance." He's like, "Okay, Chris, I hear you." And the fact is that I wasn't going to jock parties. I wasn't at that point on the football team. I'd played football in my younger days, but I wasn't on the football team. I had nothing. I wasn't in his inner circle to influence him. But I built up enough respect in all the different groups that I could pull those people together. And entrepreneurship is the same way. When
Yep.
you're looking and when you're doing things, you don't have to be friends with everybody. You don't even, I mean, I know it's people do business with people they know, like, and trust, and that is true. However, there is a place for entrepreneurs who can just bring people together and who can actually be that calming voice in between people. So please, if you're an entrepreneur out there and you feel, I have no friends and I'm this and that and nobody likes me, all that other stuff, a lot of negative stuff we go through, remember, it doesn't, just because everybody says people only do business with people they know, like, and trust, it doesn't mean you can't be the respected one that people turn to.
Right. Yep. No, I agree. That's a great point.
Just
So
real,
you were
just,
you were all over the place in high school, and in everything. Did that continue into college?
Well, and that's the interesting part. So being a DJ, I was having a lot of fun. And I was actually accepted to the number one bowling school in the nation, Wichita State University. And then I suffered a major injury in my senior year. So between that and between a bunch of other things, I made the decision I was actually accepted to Penn State too, but decided to not go to either, and decided to continue to be a disc jockey, which led me on this like weird 5-year career hiatus, so to speak. I did everything from working in a factory to doing security to everything in between. In fact, I even caught an escaped juvenile felon. So
Wow.
It's, I'm telling you, I joke around with people and go, if you haven't lived my life, a lot of people wouldn't believe it, but that's why I'm glad I at least have, I've got the paper to prove it.
Right.
People go, did you really? And I'm like, here's the here you go. Here's the paper. I wasn't hallucinating. I
Right.
wasn't doing drugs yet. No, I never
Right.
done
No.
drugs.
Yeah.
So, but
Not.
no.
You were a DJ, so I was gonna say. I mean, it's not that far off.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, and lead singer of a band and a
Right.
DJ, so it's
Yeah.
the natural assumption. But so, and here's why that 5 years is really important to my entrepreneurship journey, because I got different experiences, whether it was understanding the mentality of a factory worker, whether it was seeing what people put up with in the most boring jobs in the world, whether it was understanding what the kid who's making $2 an hour delivering papers does, whether it's understanding all these different things. I mean, I'm a student of people, and in entrepreneurship, that's one of the things that if you can continue to be a student of people, will help your journey.
Right.
So even today, when I look, I can't tell you how many stories I tell from that time period to startups I'm mentoring today, and it's still applicable because I chose to have those experiences. Now, the interesting part is during that journey, I actually bought a storefront business. So I'm going all over the place, and I said, I feel like owning a storefront. So I bought this delicatessen, ended up having to close it down, business changes, and that's something I can delve deeper into at some point. The short version is, and here's another learning lesson. My customers were telling me what they wanted, and I thought I knew better. And even if I did, it didn't matter because what I knew wasn't successful.
Right.
So I ended up having to shut it down. So folks, look, I especially with my personality, the startups I mentor a lot of times believe they got the answer. And the fact is that if you're not listening to the feedback that people are giving you, you don't have to take it all. Look, if one person tells you something and you think you know better, I normally discard it. If two people tell me something, then I go, is there something?
Right.
If three people tell me something, I go, there's got to be something. Now, it might be that I've got a message that's going out that's wrong. It might be a problem with me, not the product, but it might be a problem in my product or my offering. Right. So this is where the most dangerous thing I see a lot of especially young startups I work with, the most dangerous thing I see them do is basically believe too much in their idea. Believe too much that they have the answer, that everybody else is ignorant. They've got the answer. They know best. And the minute anybody comes and tells them something wrong against it, they just fight back. And this is coming from personal experience. I'll tell you a quick funny story. So I built this one startup, and I had a specific way that I knew was going to be successful. And a person got on the phone with me, one of the people who were going to be the original part of the original founding group, and we had probably the worst argument I've ever had with a business person. We were yelling and screaming, and he was trying to get me to see where I was wrong. And I just wasn't buying it because he wasn't buying into my vision. And he goes, Chris, but I got to be the one to tell you the emperor he's got no clothes. I'm going to tell you got no clothes, right? And people can look up that story. But I didn't believe him. And we argued, and finally went our separate ways. The fact, I'll say, the tragedy of that story is not the fact we went our separate ways and it was one of the startups that had to shut down. It was the fact that before I could get a chance to realize the error of my ways and at least apologize and try to listen to him, he was on the roadside. He was on the side of a road changing a tire and got hit by a car and died.
Wow.
So the fact is that put business aside, when you're in your entrepreneurship journey, you're going to fight with people. You're going to argue with people. Treat it just like a marriage. You never go to bed angry, never go to bed upset with somebody.
Right.
Say your piece with those people. Because even if that person never crosses your path again, you're going to be the one that if something drastic happens is going to have to live with that regret.
Now, do you think he was right in hindsight?
I think a lot of things he said was definitely right. Yeah. I mean, it was something that I just didn't want to listen because I thought I knew best. I thought I knew the right way. There was, I wish, putting aside the accident, I wish that I would have just shut the hell up and listened to him, or at least had a conversation I wish I would have had the conversation to truly understand where he was coming from. And that's another learning point. So if you're taking notes furiously, here's another learning point. Talk to people and seek to understand. There's this old saying, it's cliche, seek to understand before seeking to be understood, or something close to that.
Right.
The fact is that I should have learned this early in my life, because as a very young bowler, I had a guy who literally wrote the book on bowling. And by the way, when I was young and you wrote a book and actually had it published, look, I'm an author. I've done Amazon stuff, so I'm not saying that doesn't mean anything. But that was the day when you couldn't just publish yourself, because I'm a little bit older than I look, or maybe I'm not. I don't know. I had somebody actually. Yeah, I won't even tell that story. But I had somebody guess over my age, and I went, "Gee, thanks. That's not a compliment."
That's not fun. Yeah.
But the fact is that, when I was young, I wouldn't listen to anybody because I thought I knew everything. And I really wish I had learned it back then, that I had people who were smarter than me trying to help me. I think the biggest thing, and I'm going to slow down for a second, what people need, what I invite people listening to understand, is that if somebody is taking the time to share their knowledge with you, they have seen something in you that they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute you force back to them to try to argue with you're literally telling them they don't know what they're talking about. You're telling them that their time is not well spent. And I guarantee you they're going to move on. And you never know who that person is, could become, what advice they could or couldn't give you. You might go your separate ways, but you're missing a ton of opportunities. If you're somebody like I was, who would fight everybody every step of the way when they wanted to tell them something different, you're missing a ton of opportunities. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah. No, that's as you get older, I think you realize more and more that people aren't always trying to prove you wrong. They're trying to help you when they're telling you that sort of stuff. So it's a great point. So let's get into some of the businesses that you founded, because I'm interested. The deli story is interesting, and like we talked about a little bit before, like there's a lot of companies that spend a lot of money and they think that they know better than their customers, right? And it sounds like maybe you thought you knew more than your customers or better than your customers or your deli, and that was kind of the downfall of that. And it sounds like you learned your lesson from that. But where did the founder journey go? Like, walk me through some of the businesses you founded and how you got those first customers.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, so I'm going to actually start once again back in my childhood to explain why I didn't picture myself as a founder, and then we're going to kind of migrate. Because when I was a kid, we did the whole selling wrapping paper to your neighbors, all that stuff to raise funds, and I hated it.
Yep.
I hated it with a passion. I didn't want to annoy people. And it was funny, at that point, I wasn't seeing kind of the influence I had in school with being able to change not only teachers' minds, but kids' minds. I didn't see that as influence. I just thought that just came natural to me. I thought you had to be, when I thought about being an entrepreneur, I thought you had to be like and I'll say, if I was watching him now, I would say, how can I put this? If I was watching him back then, or if he existed back then, Gary Vee talks about, all the sales, and, I would have thought at that point, I'm trying to use Gary Vee as an analogy here because he's your prototypical hardworking entrepreneur, whether it was wine.com, that sort of thing, just that salesman mentality. And I thought that's what you needed to be to be a founder. I didn't realize how good of a salesman I was, and I actually eventually got into sales and realized there was a way I could do it that I felt comfortable with. But that lack of belief in the fact that I could be and do sales was something that stopped me from being an entrepreneur for the longest time. I thought I was meant to just be in corporate America and just work up the corporate ladder, and eventually become CEO of a major company and be done with it. So by the time the financial crisis in 2008, 2009 had hit, I built my entire life, my marriage, everything around being a corporate ladder chaser. And then the financial crisis hit, got laid off a couple times, and found it a struggle to get back into big business. And one of the learnings I'd like to pass on to your audience is the fact that if you're struggling to go in one direction, Even if you firmly believe that's the direction you should go in, to me, whether you want to call God, the universe, something greater than ourselves, to me, it's kind of that thing that exists outside of us that is trying to help guide us in a direction and saying this might not be the right direction for you. It's something that I know that's really ethereal. I know that's not concrete. I can tell you unequivocally from my experience and from all the founders I've studied that the state of flow, if you're a sports fan, you've seen it. If you're a Phillies fan, if you're a Phillies fan, or even if you're not, if you go back and watch Bryce Harper's home run from the World Series last year, when he literally came back to the dugout and went, "Did I do that?" You could tell he was in 100% the state of flow, and literally he had nothing. I mean, that was just him. That was him being at one, literally being at one with everything, and it was gone.
Yeah.
The fact is, as entrepreneurs, we can experience that same thing as well. I've been through so many failed startups and so many failed endeavors I don't even want to count. But when they were successful, it was something that it just happened. It's like people would reach out.
Yep.
I had one contract where literally there was no reason for somebody to reach out, and I get this call out of the blue saying, "You know what? I stumbled across you on LinkedIn. Let's talk a little bit." And we ended up talking, connecting, and boom, and I go, believe me, I've been there in the struggling piece where money's not coming in, nothing's happening. Like I said, I've been everything from, living in a 2,700 square foot house in the burbs to squatting in a place with no heat, no running water, no toilet, and, basically, literally taking a dump in a cat litter bucket for 3 years. And that's not an exaggeration to try and build businesses and everything. So I've experienced everything. But I can tell you that when you get in that state of flow, it does. I guess the better way to put it is if things are struggling, if you're forcing against stuff, and this is what I wish I would have learned earlier. And here's the reason I'm bringing it all up. During the year it took me between the time I got laid off the last time and the time I actually started my first startup, I was fighting against it. I was getting all this information going, I'm going in the direction I think I'm supposed to be going in. And literally, I was giving people resumes that matched their job descriptions 100%, and I would still get a thanks, but no thanks. And I was arguing with everybody and everything, just not understanding. And I look back and go, that was what was directing me to look and do something different. So the first official startup was a coaching startup. And the reason it was a coaching and leadership development startup was because I've got a master's in leadership. By the time I was 16, I was leading teams, and John Maxwell wanted to bring up a coaching, teaching, public speaking certification program. So I joined him as a founding partner, helped him bring that whole thing up. It's funny, as I was preparing for this interview, you mentioned about always the first customer. I was going to give you a story, and I'll give you a story in a little bit about another startup about the first customer there. But if I look back and go, the first customer, and it's funny because this person to this day doesn't know this. And if they're watching this, it'll be very interesting to see if they reach out. But I'll tell you something, my first customer still hasn't received the bill for the, and this is 12 years ago now. Still has not received a bill for their coaching. I'm laughing at it because when I got off the phone, I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel comfortable with the results.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't feel comfortable sending off the invoice. What I look back now is I was way too hard on myself. And that's the message I want to pass on to entrepreneurs. When you're starting your journey, if you're doing pro bono stuff, do pro bono stuff. If you're going to charge for stuff, charge for stuff. Give people everything you've got, but don't be so hard on yourself. Listen to what your clients are saying. Listen to what your customers are saying. If they are happy and truly happy with it, you can always work to get better. It doesn't mean you stop working to get better. And by the way, that is the only person So for anybody you watching thinking I'm not going to bill you, nope, that's the only person.
He's a free coach, everybody. You can get free work out of Chris and no interest for 12 years.
For 12 years.
He's like you're like a mattress factory and no interest for the first 12 years of coaching services. No, that's a good story. I like that. Let's keep going with your startups that you founded. What was kind of the next one after the coaching company?
Yeah, then one of them was a web development company. So the funny part is this goes back to the fact the reason I started it is because literally when computers were first coming into the school, I learned them so quick I was helping the teachers do. And while I was still in corporate America, my first website is literally part of the Internet Archives, and it was developed in 1998. So when I was looking at doing startups, when I was looking at doing other things, I went, okay, the coaching and the leadership development is a different challenge. It's funny, that's a whole nother deep topic for something on why it became this different challenge, and I say I had anticipated. So I went, okay, what do I got? Well, the web development. And that was actually the first customer that was the original first customer I was going to tell you about, because this is going to be a great learning lesson for people. So I started this web development company. And of course, being a tech guy was a do-all, be-all, end-all. I wasn't offshoring anything. It wasn't, wanted to build it myself and then hire people. I was using recruiters and I was using other people. And if I needed to farm stuff out, I would. But fact is I would rather work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week than have to do that. But the first customer I got there, they asked me for a quote. We sat down and we agreed to everything. And literally, as I'm giving them the quote, they're taking their quote unquote checkbook out to write me the check. And in the middle of that, I went, I could have charged you more. And they went, yep, but you, and I went, son of a.
Yeah.
And the fact is, well, and here's the thing of it. Needed the money, everything else, let fear get involved. And the fact is it's what every startup founder goes through. It's what every individual entrepreneur goes through. You have that first customer sitting in front of you. You want to nail that first customer. You don't know your worth yet. You're not, it's funny. I watch Adam Savage a lot. I was a big fan of his Mythbusters. Now he's got a YouTube channel called Tested. And one of the things he talked about was pricing. And he's like, look, I'm here to tell you, if you bill $500 a day, double it. Right. The fact is that, and the fact is that, and one of the things that he says, which I wish I would have heard 12 years ago, was just talk to people in your industry and find out what the real going rate is. Because then you don't have to, that was one of my big fears at the beginning, right? It's like, I think I know what this stuff goes for. I think I know what I'm worth. But the fact is that since I was unsure, I ended up giving a low quote. And I could have made more money. Now, I want you all to just pause and think about this for a second. I'm in the mode of needing money at this point. Of this is a critical client for me. Yet I'm going to underbid what's going on because of fear and because of everything else. Well, wait a minute. If I'd have just done the research, if I'd have just pushed fear to the side, I would have made more money, which would have made the need for the next client less. And that's what's so counterintuitive, because you think, I got to get this money right now. And until you look at it and go, I'm comfortable in my worth. I need your business. I want your business, don't need your business, even if you do. And until you really are comfortable what the market will bear, the fact is you're leaving tons of money on the table. Now, look, I've taken gigs, lower price gig back in the days. There's definitely gigs you will take, and this is another thing I want to pass on to people. There are gigs and there are things that you will do and the things that you will take because you need something at that point. 100%. You might literally be looking at a rent check and going, yeah, if somebody's willing to offer me $500 and I need $500 for my rent, I'm going to take it. Not going to argue with that. But for the most part, watch for that fear, watch for the lack of knowledge, and just really know your worth.
Yeah, and I think you had the nail on the head there, because a lot of times it's people are afraid of no money versus less money, right? I mean, they would rather take less money. Like you said, if you have rent, you have something to do, you have whatever, they'd rather take, 70% than 0%. But I think you're dead on. And I think the value, but it's against experience, right? I mean, you almost need to, you almost need to go through those growing pains, I feel like, to recognize what your value and your worth is, right? Because we've all done it. Who's ever owned a business, I think, has been through that phase where they go, oh, I could have charged more. And then you learn, like, I am more valuable than X number of dollars per hour or whatever, and then go from there. But
Well, and you're right. And even I'm going to take it one step further, and then I'll talk about the next kind of another startup real quick. The fact is that when it's a service, I'll call even web-based, like when it's a service business or developing a UX or developing a UI, the challenge you have is there's no end to people who are trying to win the race to the bottom.
right,
So
yep,
you will always, I'm telling you right now, if you take nothing, if you're a web guy and you take nothing else from this podcast that I've said, know this. There will always be, until the day you die, somebody willing to underbid you unless you're giving your service away for free. And
right,
even then, somebody's going to come along and not only give them service for free, but give them added on. So
yep,
take it out of your lexicon, take it out of your mind, take it out of everything else. Don't try to win the race to the bottom, because when you know your worth, you might get less clients, but the clients you get are going to be more aligned with where you want to go, with your thought process. I forget if it was Mark Cuban or somebody had once said, I would rather, it wasn't Cuban, I was thinking of another thing, but there was another startup founder I was talking with once who said something to the effect of, I'd rather have one $100,000 client than $10,000 clients. And it wasn't for the reason you think. He said, because the $100,000 client, they're pulling out their checkbook, giving you the check and say, get it done.
mm-hmm,
The $10,000 clients treat themselves like they are the $100,000 clients and want every single minute of your time all day long. And that's nothing against them, but a lot of times when people are trying to get your service for cheap or for free, they are in a situation where they need that discount, and they're, I don't want to say more desperate, but they're definitely going to be, look, I've had some great low dollar clients. Any of my clients who are watching and you've paid me low, I love you. Try, and this is me. It's funny. I'm gonna look straight in the camera and go, you guys all know me. You know I love you all. It's great.
right,
The fact is that the people who are striving to get that discount and be a lower dollar are usually the ones that want to be heavily involved because they're afraid that their investment, their money, is being wasted, or that they could have used it better someplace else. And for the startup founders out there, it's the same thing for investors. Look, I'll take 10, 50 grand checks all day long when I want to raise $500 or $500,000. I got that. No problem. I get the 500 grand. I will tell you that those 10 checks, I will probably have to spend more time with and nurturing the relationship than if I get two 250s or one 500. Because the people who feel more comfortable giving more, whether it's paying or investing, usually are the ones that really don't want to be involved. They just want to say, here you go. Now, by the way, if you screw up with the larger dollar ones, you're in a much bigger trouble, and they're going to come down to you a lot harder. So yes, it's, you do run the risk that if you fail, it's going to be worse. But the fact is that if you like people to take hands off, if that's the only reason you increase your price or look for higher value ones, if you like people to be more hands off, then that would be worth it.
yeah.
Or then that'd be another reason to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's all great points. So what was let's fast forward a little bit. Talk to me kind of where you got to today. You mentioned a couple things before we started. Again, you're doing the startup advisor stuff. You're doing, I think you're a CEO for a company. There's a bunch of different stuff you have going on. But what was kind of the more recent thing you founded, the most recent thing you founded, and what the first customer was there?
So, trying to think It's funny. I'm one of those weird people who have always when most or least ends up being the worst questions in the world for me because then I try to rank them in my brain.
Right,
So
right.
here's what I'd focus on. Realistically, right now, and I shouldn't say realistically, but right now, my focus is on advising startups. And what I do is I advise and mentor startups. And that's really the funny part is that I know when I look back on history, this will be that next. It's almost like I've created a startup to advise startups. And I guess that's one of the digressions I want to take real quick is sometimes we have to look back at history to understand what we were really doing and what it really meant at the time.
Right.
It's like when I originally became a leadership coach, I wasn't really thinking of it in terms of how can I build a startup and everything else. But within 6 months, it had culminated into a C corp. It had culminated into elections and stock and everything. So it culminated into that. So it kind of just naturally took that. Even when I started doing, I'll say full-time hardcore startup advising, it was something that it just spoke to my passion. It was like, look, I've had all this pain throughout my life. Let me use it to help startups. Let me use my tech background to help startups. I would say probably in this vein, I can go back. Yeah, actually, I would go back to, it has been, where is the time? Did the pandemic really shift our perception of time? Because now I'm going, this is like 2021. I'm going, it cannot be going on 2 years now.
Yeah, I think it did. I think it did. That and children. Children and the pandemic are the two things that just warp time for me. Make it not seem real.
Exactly. So if I go forward and say, what will I tell, how will I frame this story in the future? I will look back at like 2021 as saying that was kind of when I really started focusing on advising startups. And that first one was an actual nonprofit, a nonprofit faith-based organization that literally, and this is where you're going to be like other people who've asked me this question and hate my answer. And I'm going to say that only because it's not going to apply to everybody. Fact is that I just kind of had some, just was out in the ether and literally out of the blue get a call from somebody who said, I found you on LinkedIn. I like what I see. Let's have a conversation.
I love that answer. That's a great answer. That's a great, it's a great answer is because it's such a varied first customer for everybody. It's not because that wasn't somebody in your friends and family network, which is like 90%, right, of the thing. It's because of some other work you put in somewhere else to present yourself a certain way on LinkedIn, and somebody liked it and they contacted you. So I love that story.
I think that's a great way of putting it. I've always looked at this as it just, whether it's God, the universe, whatever, just kind of putting two people together. I like the fact though that it boils down to so Jay, you've just given the best piece of advice, and I hope everybody has listened to what Jay just said. Notice I talked for 41 minutes, and maybe give you a couple of nuggets. Jay talked for 32 seconds, and gives you the best advice. So, and that great advice was just present yourself well in the areas where people can find you. Do the work. I mean, believe me, there's, Jay and Jay, and you'll probably shake it. It's like for every one smidgen of work you see in public, there's 150 things going on, and, at 3:00 in the morning or, on a weekend or something, when I met John Maxwell the first time, I said typical, hey, John, I want to do what you do. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, but do you want to do what I did? Right. I said, what do you mean? He goes, do you want to go be a pastor in a church in Hillham, Indiana, in front of 12 people and, eat beans and have no money? And it really solidified for me. So I kind of use that with other people. It's like a lot of people saying, hey, I want to be a startup advisor. It's like, do you want to do what I did? Do you want to literally work in factories, and do you want to literally squat in a place with no heat? And do you want to sacrifice literally your marriage and everything? And if you're willing to do that, not that it'll happen, but if you're willing to do that, then you can do what you see everybody else do.
Right.
So I would say the first, that's how I got him. It was interesting. We had a quick conversation, and this is where I will tell you, it goes back to my philosophy of when you just know something is right, you connect. The interesting part, I'll tell you the full story. The interesting part is because of my tech background, we had one conversation. We wanted to go in one direction with more of a leadership role. He needed some more technical stuff. So I said, you know what? I've got the tech chops. Let me go ahead and prove to you that we can work together, and that this will be this will be beneficial. We did some tech work together. We then went our separate ways for a short time because it just wasn't the right time and the right place. And here's the power of reaching out. Literally, I saw an article that I hadn't talked to him in a couple of months. I saw an article that reminded me of him and his startup. I sent it to him and said, hey, I was thinking about you today. I get this text back literally immediately saying, I was thinking about you too. Do you mind if I reach out and talk to you at some point? I'm like, no, whenever, call me next week, whatever. Literally 2 hours later, he was on my phone. And 2 hours after that, we had agreed, we had an agreement in principle for me to come on and be his CEO and be his advisor.
Right.
All because he was still on my mind and I sent him something and didn't ask him for anything.
Right.
I literally had zero, and he knows this, I had zero, it wasn't even a thought in my mind that he would even reach back out or that he was going through any challenges. The fact is that, you might love him or hate him. Gary Vee, one of Gary Vee's philosophies is really powerful, which is the whole jab, 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 right hook. The fact is you just give till it hurts. And eventually, sure, you're probably going to ask somebody for something. But if you're lucky and if you do the work, what you're going to find is when you give, and give, people are going to want to, you don't give because people will do stuff for you, but it becomes this weird byproduct that when you're nice to people, whether it's them or somebody else, things just happen.
It's the old Dale Carnegie approach, It's very much just be a good person and help people out and things come back to you. The law of reciprocity, I totally believe in. Well, let's end it there. That was great. There was so much packed in there. I feel like we could do another 5 episodes and still not cover everything. And maybe we'll have you back on and we'll do another one because that was great, man. Where can people find you and what you're doing? What's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, the best way, I would say, first of all, first is search for me on LinkedIn. It's Chris M. Sprague. It's just linkedin.com/in/Chris M. Sprague.
Okay.
I do have a website. It's Chris M. Sprague. The fact is that if you want to see how I can help people from a speaking standpoint and kind of the topics I talk about fear and authentic empathy and that sort of stuff. So the one thing I would say to folks is, first of all, you've gotten a good glimpse as to how I kind of do things when I'm on stage or when I'm in front of a crowd. If this type of stuff appeals to you, reach out to me. Check out my Chris M. Sprague. You can see what topics I talk on. We can talk. If you want to see all the other professional stuff, like the one gaming startup I'm involved in and other things, take a look at me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Reach out there. And let's have if what you see aligns with what you need or something, or if I can help you in any way, if I can make a connection, just look for me on LinkedIn and I'll be happy to do what I can.
Awesome, man. Well, this was fantastic. I really appreciate your time. I mean, I know you're a very busy guy, so thank you for coming on. People look you up on LinkedIn. We'll put your description, in the notes for the show. But thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. But let's talk again soon. All right.
You're welcome, Jay. I appreciate you, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, buddy. See you, man.
Thanks.